Hey, welcome to the fourth installment of the SivamStudios drawing tutorials. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about combining volumetric shapes. And in the previous videos we did talk about the idea of using simple volumetric shapes to create an object. So, for example, we have rectangles, rectangular structures, we have cylinders, we have tapered cylinders, we have cones, and we have spherical and elliptical structures. And I'll just indicate those really quick since we've already talked about this in a previous video. And today what we're going to do is we're going to talk more about combining these shapes to make some more complex type images. So these are like the foundation pieces, basic volumetric shapes. And if we start to combine these shapes, there are three ways we can actually combine them. The first method is by intersection. So if I were to draw, say, something like this. This is an intersection of two cylinders. That's one way we can combine these particular shapes. We can also combine them by tapering them. So if this is a cylinder structure right here, we can make these subsequent cylinders smaller. And notice that the lines for these cylinders start to taper. Right? I'll indicate the dashed lines for the parts that you don't necessarily see. So this is known as tapering. So that's another method of combining volumetric shapes. Of course, this is the intersection where the pieces actually connect and go through. Tapering, of course, is stacking the shapes end to end, going from large to medium to small. And of course, the other method by which we can actually combine shapes is through overlap. So if I were to now draw a series of cylinders that are kind of moving in kind of a curved direction, these dotted lines indicate parts that we don't necessarily see, but we have a connection of these shapes kind of in a almost C configuration. So tapering and overlap are related. Actually, all three of these items are all interrelated to one another, but there are methods by which you can actually achieve a sense of depth and also use them to make more complex shapes. So this is the first thing that I think would be great to practice. Now I'm just using cylinders here, tapered cylinders, but we can also extend that metaphor over to things like rectangular objects. So for example, here's my dashed line. I can actually make another extended rectangular shape that protrudes out from the base. Drawing that another way, if I were to see the top of this object, this might be a little bit easier to see. So we've got tapering going up, where the rectangular structures are getting smaller and smaller, and here, just by extending this out a little bit more. So we've got a tapered series of rectangles. Alright, so that's something that you should practice, getting used to working with these different volumetric shapes. We can also do the same thing with spheres and ellipses. I'll just show you very briefly with spheres. I've got two spheres that are kind of one is in front of the other. There is overlap. I'll draw another sphere here to indicate overlap. You can taper spheres. Tapering is simply just adjusting the size down. And let's indicate some dotted lines to show the objects that we don't necessarily see. I'm using the lasso tool for this. Tapering, in this case, is also a form of overlap. It's just that the circles, or the spheres rather, are getting progressively smaller and smaller. And that's something that helps us achieve depth. And of course, we can intersect a sphere within a sphere, right? So, I'm going to indicate these contour lines to show you that there's one surface embedded inside another surface. So those are definitely things that I think would be beneficial to practice, especially when you're starting off with volumetric shapes. The next thing I want to talk about is extrusion. And extrusion has to do with starting off with some type of closed shape. In this case, I'll start with an oval. Let me close that over here. And if I were to draw another oval up above, obviously we have an inverted bucket or a cylinder, right? So I'm extruding from this base circle or base oval to a smaller oval. So I'm extruding, right? I'm creating a surface that is represented by the two base shapes, these two spheres. So if I were to extend that out, let's just say that I'm drawing a couple of circles here, and now I'm going to involve some tapering. I can extrude from this first base shape and connect these circles together, and notice what's happening here. These circles, the way they're arranged, are kind of moving down towards a point, and it's creating a rounded surface. Think about this as like a blade of grass or a zoomed in view of hair, a follicle of hair, right? But we can do much more than just extrude from a circular shape. You can really extrude from any closed shape. So for example, if I were to, I don't know, try something that looks like this, where it's a trapezoid with a piece cut out of it, and if I were to draw that piece, that same exact shape below it, almost looks like a block letter A without the inset. I can extend these lines such that the edges connect. Sorry that I'm not hitting it totally straight. And of course the dashed lines here represent the parts of the surface that we don't necessarily see. They're present, but they're not directly in this particular view. So you can see that if I were to draw the contour lines move back, go across, come out, and move. So we have a shape that has some depth. So that is known as extrusion. So you can extrude any closed shape. And the neat thing about this is you can combine this extrusion with intersections, with tapering, and overlap to create some very complex looking structures, you know, things like buildings, cars, etc. So an exercise that I think would be very beneficial to practice is to maybe come up with a base shape. Let's just flip it around this time. And then add an intersection of another complex shape or volumetric shape. All the while keeping your contour lines in mind. You know that this is a rounded object. Maybe I'll just use that in a different color here. So these are rounded shapes, these are straight shapes, the curve is right here. And there you go. You've got a structure now that is using a combination of interlocking volumetric shapes to create structures. I hope you found this particular tutorial to be useful. It's certainly going to make it easier when you're drawing things like muscles or automobiles or other cars. So do take a look at it, and if you've got any questions, hit me up in the comments below. You can contact me at SivamStudios.com. You can take a look at my work there. It's got a link to my portfolio site. You can also follow me on Twitter at PCWeenies. That's PCWEENIES. I'm always looking for new tutorials to go ahead and come up with. So if you've got ideas, if you've got some feedback, or you'd like to see me tackle something else, let me know, and I'll be happy to go ahead and share that on this YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and please tell your friends, and we'll see you next time.